I'd like to invite my colleague, Professor James Forbes from the Aerospace Engineering to come and tell you a little bit more about the details of what's happening in Michigan. Thanks.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name's James Forbes. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Aerospace Engineering here at the University of Michigan. And now I'd like to take some time and give you a brief overview at the robotics-related research being conducted here at the University of Michigan. So as you can see from this slide, we have lots of faculty members involved in robotics-related research. In fact, we have over 35 faculty members involved in, did I say aerospace? Robotics-related research, sorry, including members of the Aerospace Engineering Department, Biomedical Engineering Department, Computer Science, Electrical Engineering, Mechanical Engineering. Pretty much we have a faculty member interested in robotics in every department we have here at the University of Michigan. And the research that is ongoing here at the University of Michigan it ranges from bipedal locomotion, so here we have a picture of Mabel, as well as UAVs, autonomous aerial vehicles, rehabilitation robotics, and various aspects of ground vehicles as well. Even though we don't have a robotics department, we have a cohort of faculty interested in robotics, and we're actually starting a robotics institute very soon. And when we hire new faculty members, often we're interested in if they're going to be doing robotics-related research. So here we have some of our recent hires, David Remy, who came from ETH Zurich, Matthew Johnson Robertson, who came from the University of Sydney, Sydney Chesnick, who came from Stanford, and Shai Revson, who came from Berkeley, and myself, and I'm from the University of Toronto. And I'd like to point out here that every one of these faculty members are from a different department: mechanical, electrical, biomedical, naval and marine engineering, as well as aerospace. So we have a very diverse set of faculty interested in lots of aspects of robotics, but specific to, for example, aero or biomedical or electrical engineering. As was mentioned previously, we are starting a robotics institute, and in particular, we are starting a robotics PhD program. This fall is our first set of robotics PhD candidates. And this PhD program is going to focus on three things, which is sensing, reasoning, and acting. Also, we're pushing towards a new facility. We want to have a robotics dedicated building where we can house our graduate students as well as our faculty members to create some synergy amongst the students and the faculty members. Hopefully that building will be built in 2017. And also we're hoping to launch an automated vehicle test track in the fall of 2014. So now I'd like to take some time and discuss some of the specifics of various professors' research. So I'll start with Professor Orzo in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. And he is primarily interested in how bandwidth and time delays affect sensing and communication. So for example, say you had 5 vehicles as depicted on the slide, and you want them to drive autonomously together. So it's very important for safety reasons that they travel at the same speed and have a particular distance between them. So if there's a communication delay or you have a limited bandwidth of communication, how does that affect the safety of the convoy? How does that affect, if a vehicle brakes or accelerates and there's a delay, how fast can the system react to make sure there's going to be a safe distance, safe velocity of the vehicles? Professor Alsoy, he's interested in obstacle avoidance in the presence of sensor uncertainty. And so the objective here is to say you had a vehicle and there's, say, something in the way and you want to be able to drive around that. Well, that sensor, there's some uncertainty in that sensor measurement. So how do you perform that maneuver knowing that there's some uncertainty in your measurement? And those who've worked with sensors, I'm sure you know, they're never perfect, right? There's always noise in the system that you must account for when you're doing any sort of navigation, guidance, or control. Professor Jeff Stein in Mechanical Engineering, he's also interested in hazard avoidance. And in particular, what he's interested in is augmenting guidance and control algorithms with vehicle dynamics. So historically, often vehicle dynamics models, there's this simple 2 degree of freedom, kind of like a bicycle model as shown here on the slide. And what he's interested in is, well, let's augment our guidance and hazard avoidance algorithms with a full 14 degree of freedom dynamics model. So if you have a vehicle, you're going to have some pitch motion, some roll motion. So how do you augment that into the real-time hazard avoidance algorithm? Ed Olson in computer science engineering, he's interested in various aspects of ground vehicles. So for example, say you had a fleet of ground vehicles, 15, 10 of these vehicles, and they're coordinating with a human being. How do you do that in a streamlined and an efficient way? Professor Ryan Eustace in Naval and Marine Engineering, he's interested in underwater robotics. So for example, say you had a ship hull and you want to assess whether the ship hull is damaged or not. Ryan has it's actually back there, I just was looking at it now, a really interesting underwater robot which we can go under the ship and scan the ship hull to see if it's damaged or see it needs to be cleaned or something like that. And this technology can also be used for assessing the quality of civil engineering infrastructure, so for example, bridge abutments or things of that nature. Professor Ella Atkins in the Aerospace Engineering Department, she's interested in kind of all things that fly and are autonomous. So for example, quadrotor helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft. Here we have a solar drone. So basically, it's a fixed-wing aircraft covered in solar panels, so you can have long endurance missions, as well as some flapping-wing aircraft. Professor Jesse Grizzle in electrical engineering, he's interested in bipedal locomotion, and his lab has the world's fastest-running robot with knees. It's called Mabel. When Jesse first started this research, he had a dynamics model which was primarily just a stick man, as shown here on the slide. And today, he's dealing with a really high-fidelity dynamics model that not only incorporates the mass of the system, but also these very large flexible springs. And then he's looking at various model-based control strategies for walking. And kind of the name of the game is how do you get something to walk, but also, for example, not trip when it goes upstairs, or if there's a little bit of a disturbance, how do you make sure it can recover and keep on walking? Professor David Remy in mechanical engineering, he's also interested in locomotion of legged vehicles. In particular, he's interested in exploiting the natural dynamics of these legged vehicles and also taking inspiration from nature. So for example, say you had a dog or a horse and you use some sort of motion capture system to figure out its gait. How can you replicate that gait on the robot and exploit some of the natural characteristics we see in biology? And the reason you want to do that is because horses, dogs, human beings, we tend to walk very efficiently. So we want to exploit some of that natural, energy-efficient motion when we design robotic systems. Professor Ken Oldham is in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. He's interested in micro-robotics. So for example, very, very small micro-devices that can kind of crawl around much like insects do. Professor Don Tilbury is interested in robot teleoperation. Some of the goals of her research are assessing what limits the speed and performance of teleoperation. Matt Reed is involved in looking at what we know about human motor control and how we humans do actions like hammering or drilling, and how can we take that knowledge and give it to a robot. So say if you wanted a robot to do a hammering task, what do we as humans do, because we tend to hammer pretty well, and how can we download that information to a robot somehow? Cynthia Chestik in biomedical engineering is doing some really interesting research in taking signals in our bodies, so for example, neurons firing in our brains, doing some machine learning on that, and then, for example, controlling a prosthetic or controlling some sort of video game or something like that. That's a really hard problem because the signals in our bodies, they're very, very low voltage, for example, and they're also embedded in a muscle. So there's some really interesting machine learning going on there. Professor Emily Provost is interested in using autovisual expressions of emotion and then communicating that to a robot somehow. So for example, using some speech processing technology to assess how a conversation is going, if it's, people are happy or angry or sad or something like that. Professor Saito is interested in multi-robot coordination and task scheduling. So for example, say you had various manufacturing robots made by ABB or something like that, and they're in a work cell doing some robotic welding or pick and place. How do you coordinate their movement and their motion in an energy efficient manner so you can save basically energy at the end of the day? Professor Barton is interested in motion control for manufacturing, and some aspects of that include iterative learning control, advanced sensing strategies So for example, using vision or atomic force microscopy for sensing various things. And applications of that are rehabilitation robotics, various kinds of novel manufacturing, as well as UAVs. Professor Kamat, who's in civil engineering, is interested in using autonomy for construction. So for example, building construction, so for example, laying bricks or excavating and mining. That's a really interesting research area because, for example, mining is very dangerous. So if you can get a robot, in a mine instead of a human being, that can improve the safety of the overall mining procedure. The vision for the Robotics Institute is to create a synergy between all faculty involved in robotics. So that means faculty in aerospace, mechanical, electrical, all these faculty members, put them in the same building, have an institute where we can all talk together, have our graduate students working together so we can create some cross-disciplinary research. It's often said that big breakthroughs don't happen in one discipline. Big breakthroughs happen where disciplines overlap. So the idea is to bring all these people together and put them in a room and say, well, we have this one problem, well, how would you guys solve it, and get everyone talking. And as I mentioned before, there's some focus areas. So for example, reasoning and learning and autonomy. There's also a focus area in rehabilitation robotics and biomedical engineering. We have a really strong control faculty here at the University of Michigan. My core research area is actually control systems, so we want to exploit that strength of the University of Michigan, as well as other focus areas such as human-robot interaction and manufacturing. And so with that, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen about the University of Michigan robotics research. And if you have any questions, I'll be available after. Thank you very much.